This module will provide a brief overview for the alternate assessment and participation guidelines. The Kentucky Department of Education was approved for a waiver for the 2017-18 school year. The Kentucky Department of Education requested a waiver for the 2018-19 school year based on the number of students who can be tested using an alternate assessment on annual statewide Kentucky Performance Rating for Educational Progress, or K-PREP tests. The limit set by federal regulations states that there shall be no more than 1% of the total number of students who are taking the alternate assessment assessed in each subject area tested. As of the date of this presentation, the 1% cap on alternate assessment participation remains unconfirmed. The United States Department of Education's requested clarification on some items. The 1% is for the state as a whole, not a particular district. Some districts may be over 1% based on student populations. However, districts have been encouraged to review students in red flag groups, for example, mental disabilities that are mild and autism, to determine if the data supports the student's eligibility for participation in the alternate assessment. If participants have a specific question about current high school students who are identified with a mild mental disability, or students who are not longer eligible for participation in the alternate assessment, please let them know that there is a separate training available for guidance on these types of issues. Based on the data, the state anticipates exceeding the 1% threshold set forth in the ESSA for the 2018-19 school year, and likely for the 2019-20 school year. The Kentucky Department of Education is currently working with the U.S. Department of Education to clarify and review data as it is finalized. These links allow participants to look more full at the waiver, data, and supporting documents submitted by the Kentucky Department of Education to the United States Department of Education. As part of the waiver process, the Kentucky Department of Education developed a definition of a student with significant cognitive disability. These are the students we should see in the 1%. This definition is part of the process for determining if a student is eligible to participate in the alternate assessment. As the slide indicates, cognitive and adaptive behavior scores and data should prevent a student from attaining grade level achievement even with modifications and accommodations. If someone asks the difference between an accommodation and a modification, simply state an accommodation changes how a student accesses learning, and a modification changes what a student is learning. This topic is gone over in more depth in the additional trainings for ARC chairs on participation guidelines for alternate assessment. The Kentucky Department of Education's definition of a student with a significant cognitive disability means the student must meet eligibility criterion in one or more of the existing categories of disabilities under IDEA, for example, intellectual disabilities, autism, or multiple disabilities. They must have cognitive and adaptive behavior functioning that prevents them from attaining grade level achievement standards even with program modifications and accommodations. And the student requires extensive individual instruction across multiple settings to access and make progress in the Kentucky academic standards, and to maintain, generalize, and demonstrate learning. Students must also have a significant cognitive disability that is not primarily the result of excessive or extended absences, a disability related to visual or auditory disabilities, emotional behavior disabilities, specific learning disabilities, and speech-language differences, those identified as English learners, predetermined poor performance on grade-level assessment, if the student displays disruptive behaviors or experiences emotional duress during testing, on the basis of an administrative decision, or the education environment or instructional setting. ARC committees must discuss and record the discussion of each of these exclusionary factors as part of the determination of a student's eligibility for participation in the alternate assessment. As the ARC chair, multiple data sources must be used to determine if a student is eligible for participation in the alternate assessment. Many of the sources are listed on the slide. It's important to remember to not just look at the one or two sources of data when determining eligibility. For example, don't just look at classroom progress data. Look at progress data over time and what accommodations or modifications were given at specific points in the data. Again, this topic is gone over in more depth in the additional trainings for ARC chairs on the participation guidelines for alternate assessment. Data showing communication difficulties should not be the sole source of data used when reviewing data for eligibility for participating in the alternate assessment. Students with communication difficulties participate in the regular assessment with accommodations. Communication struggles should not be the primary consideration for participation in the alternate assessment. Again, this topic is gone over in more depth in the additional trainings for ARC chairs on participation guidelines for alternate assessment. If a participant completed the online module through HDI during the 2017-18 school year, the participant will need to complete a refresher course through HDI. The Kentucky Department of Education is currently in the process of developing this course. Once the course is available, KDE will notify districts. If a participant did not complete the online module through HDI during the 2017-18 school year, and that participant will chair any meetings where participation in the alternate assessment will be discussed, please have them contact Katie Cooper with the Greater Louisville Education Cooperative or the appropriate ECE staff for Jefferson County Public Schools to get the course completed. If there's interest enough in having the participation guidelines for alternate assessment for ARC chairperson trainings, Katie Cooper, the low incident disability consultant for the cooperative, can work with participants or the districts to schedule. This concludes the alternate assessment module for ARC chairpersons. Additional resources are found on this slide.